Good afternoon, honored guests and Case Western Reserve University students, faculty, and staff. I'm Eric Kaler, and it's my great honor to be the president of Case Western Reserve University, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2024 Inamori Ethics Prize Academic Symposium. I also want to welcome those who are watching us via live stream. And as I'm sure you are all aware, our prize winner this year, Dr. Anthony Fauci, is unable to be here because he is recovering from West Nile virus. However, I am told that he is among our live stream guests. So, Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci, on behalf of everyone here at Case Western Reserve University and the Inamori Foundation, we congratulate you on receiving this honor, and we wish you continued progress to a full recovery. Before we get started today, I want to acknowledge some special guests in the audience. We are honored to be joined by our esteemed colleagues from Kyoto, Japan. They are Ms. Shinobu Inamori Karazawa, the president of the Inamori Foundation, and Ms. Sayaka Hiroki, the foundation's partnership and relationship manager. Thank you both for being here. In addition to our own students and members of the university community, we have students from Shaker Heights High School in the audience. Welcome, students, and thank you for being part of today's event. I also want to thank our three distinguished symposium panelists for sharing their time and expertise with us. They are the former director of the Ohio Health Department, Dr. Amy Acton. Macalester College President, Susanna Rivera. And our 2019 Inamori Ethics Prize recipient, the producer, actor, and advocate, Mr. LeVar Burton. Today, Mr. Burton will also be accepting the Inamori Ethics Prize on behalf of Dr. Fauci. Given the experiences of our panelists, I am sure that today's conversation and the Q&A that follows will be engaging. And again, thank you for joining us this afternoon for this symposium. At this time, I welcome our Provost and Executive Vice President, Joy Ward, to the podium. Joy, please.
Thank you, President Kaler, and thank you to all of you in the audience for joining us as we explore a timely topic addressing moral imperatives in public health locally and globally. We are here today because of the vision and generosity of Dr. Kazuo Inamori and the Inamori Foundation, whose generous endowment created the Inamori International Center for Ethics and Excellence at Case Western Reserve University and the annual Inamori Ethics Prize. We want to get into our conversation as quickly as possible, but first, let me briefly tell you a bit about our panelists. First, Dr. Amy Acton. Dr. Acton is a physician, researcher, and community leader who has spent more than 35 years pursuing her passion for public health and wellness. She is in private practice in preventative medicine and global public health. Whether as director of the Ohio Department of Health during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, vice provost of humankind at the Columbus Foundation, or a professor in global public health, Dr. Acton has inspired interdisciplinary teams to address some of society's most challenging issues. Next, LeVar Burton. Mr. Burton is a multi-award-winning actor, director, television host, and advocate. He is best known to television audiences around the world for his role in Roots and Star Trek, and for his 23 years as producer and host of the beloved PBS series, Reading Rainbow. Mr. Burton's dedication to education has resulted in a variety of projects, including the interactive digital library, Skybrary, and the award-winning 2023 documentary, The Right to Read, which positions America's literacy crisis as a civil rights issue. Notably, Mr. Burton was awarded the Inamori Ethics Prize in 2019, and he will soon be hosting a new show based on the game Trivial Pursuit, debuting on October 3rd on the CW. So make sure that you check that out. Next is Suzanne M. Rivera. Dr. Rivera is the 17th president of Macalester College, located in St. Paul, Minnesota. She has worked in higher education for nearly 30 years as a leader, instructor, researcher, and scholar. Dr. Rivera was previously vice president for research and technology management right here at Case Western Reserve, and I had the pleasure of getting to know her just as I was coming on campus. She also served on the faculty for the university's departments of bioethics and also pediatrics. During her tenure, she led original research projects funded by the National Institutes of Health, the Federal Office of Research Integrity, and the Cleveland Foundation. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. Next, our own Professor Shannon E. French, the Inamori Professor in Ethics and Director of the Inamori International Center for Ethics and Excellence, will be monitoring the discussion. Before I turn the podium over to Professor French, please join me in viewing a short video about the life and the work of Dr. Anthony Fauci, our 2024 honoree.
I was born in Brooklyn, 1940, when I was about 9 years old. My father bought his own pharmacy. When people were going through tough times and needed a prescription and they didn't have the money to pay for it, he would say, "No, don't worry about it, take it." And I guess that spilled over to me.
Anthony Fauci's early life, grounded in service and compassion, nurtured the empathy that became central to his career in medicine and public health. These values were reinforced during his Jesuit high school education, where he captained the basketball team and excelled in both humanities and science.
So I figured the best way to combine an interest in the humanities with an interest in science was to be a physician.
Anthony attended Cornell University's Medical College.
Medical school was terrific. I can still feel that excitement, intimidation, anxiety. You don't want to make a mistake.
He graduated at the top of his class.
I fully wanted to just be a physician who's just would take care of patients all day.
During the Vietnam War, newly appointed male physicians had to serve in either the armed forces or public health service.
The people at the NIH wanted me to come there, so that was my 3-year fellowship that got me interested in research.
A pivotal moment came in July 1981 when he noticed a spike in deaths. 26 young, otherwise healthy gay men in the CDC's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report.
Reading that totally transformed my professional career because I made the decision right there. I said, if there's one disease that I have to study, is this disease.
The disease would later be known as HIV/AIDS. In 1984, Dr. Fauci assumed the role of director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Under his leadership, his lab made key advances in understanding HIV/AIDS, and he played a major role in responding to outbreaks, including SARS, Ebola, Zika, and COVID-19. His work paved the way for the rapid development of a COVID-19 vaccine. Dr. Fauci advised 7 U.S. presidents during his career and was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President George W. Bush in 2008.
The idea of having partnered with George W. Bush to create the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, which is PEPFAR. And PEPFAR has saved millions of lives of people receiving anti-HIV in Africa and developing countries. I will always consider one of the most important things that I've done.
After 54 years at the NIH, Dr. Fauci stepped down in late 2022. He's now a distinguished professor at Georgetown University.
There are so many beautiful things about science, a feeling of gratification and contribution to mankind. That's what I'm going to stress to the younger generation of scientists and people who are considering going into science.
In June of this year, he published a memoir titled On Call. Dr. Fauci has been married for more than 35 years to Christine Grady, Chief of Bioethics at the NIH Clinical Center. They have 3 daughters and a granddaughter. After a remarkable career with profound global impact, is retirement on the horizon?
You know, I may be 83, but I feel like I'm 55. So to me, I don't see any end to it, but I can tell you when I feel I'm not able to leave it all on the court, then I'll walk off the court.
Today, the Inamori International Center for Ethics and Excellence at Case Western Reserve University is proud to present the 2024 Inamori Ethics Prize to Dr. Anthony Fauci.
That was so moving, and let me just say, wow, and thank you, Dr. Fauci, for all that you have done. Now back to our panelists. You can read more about our panelists in our online program. And now I look forward to hearing this conversation, and I hope all of you will take this opportunity to listen and to engage with our panelists. At this time, I turn the program over to Dr. Shannon E. French, the Inamori Professor in Ethics, who will moderate today's discussion. Thank you so much. Sure.
Thank you so much, Provost Ward. It's a pleasure to be here with you in another year and another Inamori Ethics Prize. And I think no better time to talk about the issues that are hard to talk about, but which affect all of us. We're here specifically to talk about the moral imperatives of public health with a focus on emerging local and global health threats, because unfortunately, I think we all know that the pandemic that we all lived through is not the last one we will ever see. I want us to mostly look forward in our conversation. But just to orient us a bit, we're going to begin with a quick retrospective now. If you don't mind, wonderful panelists, I'm going to refer to you by your first names, and you may do the same, just speaking to each other. And so, Amy, I'm going to go ahead and start with you, if I may. And audience, as I ask my questions, you may be formulating questions in your own minds, because we will have some time at the end for a few audience questions as well. So, Amy, you were obviously a central figure in the shaping the state's response here in Ohio to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I know you have lessons learned from that experience. We got to talk about some of them on the radio this morning. But I'm interested if you would shape for us, what were your key takeaways from that experience?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the honor of being here. We've been having such wonderful conversations behind the scene. It truly is an honor. And Dr. Fauci, I do want to say it's an honor to have served alongside of you. This award, for those of you who don't know, honors folks who bring out the best in us, humanitarian goals and common good. And your father ran corporate life in a different way. So I just want to acknowledge that this is the setting, and the people who have won this award are people who have been my heroes, people I taught about in my global public health class at OSU. People like Marian Wright Edelman, Francis Collins, Sam Brock, who did remote area medical, and LeVar, who it's been just an honor to get to know. I was a very ordinary person who found myself in an extraordinary moment in history, as you all all got to watch, many of you here on air live. And, but I want to say, you know, when I walked in the door, I was sort of like the Ted Lasso of politics, if that could be a thing to be. And we know it was a political moment, but I want you to know that I saw remarkable heroism. I had this feeling at the beginning, you know, right away that the problems that we would face couldn't be solved by any one person. It had to take every system, all of us rowing. We had a common enemy the world over. And it was a shame. I was in the White House the last week of February as the stock market crashed for the second time, begging Mick Mulvaney to tell the president that this was the better angels, higher angels moment. We really, I was Googling the word pandemic as a global health doctor. So why I felt like, why are they just not naming it? I said, this is FDR Winston Churchill time where, you know, we need that sort of narrative or story that walks us through what we're about to have happen. And so when the governor and I first came on air, and it was actually here at Metro Health in Cleveland, we made a promise that we would tell you the truth as we knew it. And it was the Ohio News Network. And I remember thinking, well, at least nobody watches this. But by the end of it, it was the three of us sequestered, the lieutenant governor, the governor, and I, and one dark lens. For those of you who have ever looked into a camera, on the other side of it, you could literally feel all of us. And the feeling was like Titanic, if we could just start pulling one another up on the life raft and all start rowing together, we would all get through. And I want to tell you, no order I could have written did that. I could just tell you the brutal honesty, put the cards on the table, and everyone in Ohio started solving problems from wherever they sat, whether it was their business, their families' issues, nursing homes, prisons, hospitals. Everyone started doing that, and indeed, Ohioans did flatten the curve. So the things the New York Times did a 7-week analysis of our press conferences, and they said 3 things: brutal honesty, vulnerability, going on the journey with you, and courage doesn't mean that you never have fear, but the word courage comes from core, which is heart and soul. And we tried to share some of that with you in stories big and small, alongside talking about a virus, just to hold that space. And last, we asked more of people. Every day I would say something like, check on the nurse. Can you watch her kids while she does the double shift? The older person who lives down the street from you. And in that way, I was privileged, and everywhere I go in the state, to see how Ohioans they rode, and we have yet to tell that story.
You know, yes. You ended your comments there, Amy, with the word story. And I'm hearing some really important themes about communication, and that the way that you communicated was, I won't say it was more important than what you had to communicate, but it was obviously essential to getting that communication to be effective and to inspire people. And I liked your Titanic analogy, although I admit in my head I was thinking there's room on the door, Rose. But but we have to find the humor even in difficult places. But I would say that one of the harder aspects of that, and the aspect that we definitely don't want to lose when we talk about difficult communication and difficult times, is that we have to include everyone. And this makes me want to turn to you, LeVar, because you have consistently advocated for representation in these kinds of situations, and to make sure that people are at the table, have a voice, and that we don't leave people behind. And I think that not everyone understands the history of different communities, and the fact that you can't speak to everyone the same because their lived experience isn't the same. And I wonder if you could tell us more about that.
Well, you know, the pandemic and its attendant lockdown was really eye-opening for a lot of Americans in terms of how different communities, different constituencies respond to healthcare crises. right? For Black people in this country, with experiments like the Tuskegee experiments, Henrietta Lacks, there are ample reasons for Black people and people of color to be suspicious of the medical community because they have been a source of trauma for people who look like me. And the need and necessity to communicate in a way, in a language that different constituencies and communities can actually speak is critically important. I like to say you need to meet people where they are before you can take them where you want them to go. It was a primary mission on Reading Rainbow. Television was the technology that we used to access the audience because of its engagement factor. You have to meet folks where they are. And my whole disappointment at the retrenchment that we are experiencing these days in efforts of diversity, equity, and inclusion, including the co-opting of the acronym, right, politically, and turning it into something negative, is very disturbing. And I love that people are now saying definitely earned it, right? Substituting new words for
acronym.
For the acronym. But yes, and the idea that public health it really is about the entirety of the public and that everyone deserves access to the technology, right? But we also owe the population, and especially marginalized populations, we owe them the honor and respect of knowing that we need to communicate to them in a language we all understand. And I believe that storytelling is the language of human communication.
Well, yes. So, Sue, I think this is such an important point. We're going to build on it a little bit more. With your knowledge, I know you can share some examples that can get us to understand better some of the vaccine hesitancy that wasn't necessarily about any political stance, but had to do more with the kind of historical harms that LeVar is talking about. I'd love to hear some examples, but also your thoughts on what can we do to help improve trust among those who have been genuinely mistreated in the past by, for example, the healthcare community?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Before I answer it, I want to thank you for including me on this panel today, Shannon. It's a special privilege for me, having been a member of the CWRU community, to be back here today celebrating Dr. Fauci in this way. I used to participate in the selection committee at the Inamori Center that bestowed these awards. And so being a part of this is really special for me. And I want to thank Dr. Fauci directly, if he's watching, for his tremendous work and legacy and care. The example is a really powerful one that we can all only aspire to try to replicate in our own work. The question you ask is an important one, and it's one that when I was working as a scholar before I became a college president, I focused on almost exclusively. That is to say, how can medicine and science include all members of society in a way that fairly distributes both the risks and the benefits, and that uses its power, the power of knowledge creation, to dismantle systems of oppression that make disproportionate burdens for different populations. And so we've already heard LeVar invoke, for example, the U.S. government-funded study of syphilis in Tuskegee. And I think many people are familiar with that example, understanding that vulnerable people were used as research subjects in a way that wasn't beneficial to them as a population. And I guess what I want to do with your question is to take my answer in a slightly different direction and say, this isn't just ancient history. There are reasons that people are suspicious of our systems of power because they've been used to harm deliberately. And we can look today at how social inequality continues to disproportionately harm more vulnerable populations. I'm thinking about the maternal mortality and infant mortality crisis that continues to be such a tragedy in the Black community. I'm looking at the gun violence epidemic, which is also a public health crisis. I'm thinking about the disproportionate effects of the climate crisis and how poor communities bear the brunt of environmental disasters. And so I think it's not enough for us to think about the history of oppression. We need to be brave enough, to use your word, courage. We need to be brave enough to confront what is still so unfair in our society. And so when you say, what can we do to make people trust so they won't be afraid of a vaccine or afraid to get treatment? I think it starts with demonstrating our own trustworthiness. Right? We can't just expect people to trust the medical profession or expect people to trust scientists or elected officials or college presidents, right? Anyone who's in a leadership position, I think, has to earn trust. And demonstrating one's trustworthiness means doing what you say you're going to do, leading with integrity, listening for understanding, and making sure that people are not left behind, that there aren't people who are not at the table when important decisions get made. So that means being honest, but also being transparent and making sure that everyone can be heard. And I think that those are skills that are necessary in leadership in every sector, in every part of our society, not just in the medical profession.
Well, I appreciate you all thanking me for putting you on the panel, but I think the audience will agree with me that we're the lucky ones to have the three of you on this panel. I feel like we have to talk about the elephant in the room to some extent. So I want to go back to Amy for a moment. And I know these aren't the happy part of your memories, but when you were doing the work you were doing, telling the truth, telling the story as you learned it day by day to Ohioans about what was happening with the pandemic, we know that you were also confronted with people and groups that were hostile, who didn't have that hostility grounded in the sort of things that we're talking about, but were in effect just taught or told to point hate at you. And I'm sorry to bring that up, but I think we have to talk about it. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, again, I being an ordinary person, and I can tell you, we were trying to save 11.7 million lives every day. And in some ways, that both the hate and the love were there, but we were so focused on the work. But I want to tell you, the hate was real. I had executive protection from March on. The plot that you might have heard about kidnapping Gretchen Whitmer was also against me and our governor. But it was actually, we're sitting here in a beautiful synagogue. There was a moment in mid-April where the President of the United States tweeted, "Activate," and then he did another tweet that was "Liberate." And I remember at the time thinking, is this what I think it is? And literally, we saw Charlottesville. Pretty soon in my yard were some of the same cast of characters that we would then see at January 6th. There was a systematic push on the governors who were leading, and they were governors like our governor and other Republican governors reaching across the aisle to Democratic governors. Everyone was trying to row, but this was a very systematic shift. They had been trying to do something to stop my voice for a while, but it was literally one press conference, and it's on air, where the governor, it was Easter and Passover. And the governor said something to me. My husband's Episcopal, I'm Jewish. Said something like, "I hope you have a nice virtual Seder." And I said something like, "I make a mean ball, a matzo ball soup, Governor." And because we would have these conversations, and literally the next press conference plastered against the glass of the State House were AR-15s and Guy Fawkes wearing masks, literally 6 feet from where the lieutenant governor was standing. And so that was the beginning of it. And the tropes began with a legislator saying that I was a globalist, and then it went to women's misogynistic themes. And it ended with finding my birth mother, who I had not seen since I was 12, saying things. So there was no stone they wouldn't turn. But the actual reason I stepped down wasn't that. It was the pressure from the legislator, literally an order that I was being asked to sign that I just felt would kill people. And so I made a promise again to the governor. Governor, I will serve you. I will keep helping. And I have kept helping even through this last state of the state. But I wouldn't sign it. I'll just advise. And that person who wanted the order that I couldn't sign was arrested 2 weeks later. And the largest FBI scandal in our state's history. But I need you to leave here knowing something. The love was so much greater than the hate. And it's absolutely true. And please know that we would say things like, act on kindness, not hate, act on kindness, not fear, act on love, not hate, act on kindness, not fear. That became a mantra in Ohio. And I'll just leave you with this. Kindness is an age-old, enduring principle. In every religion, in every world mythology, it is about the human in us greeting the human in you, not othering. In a world right now where we know people are intentionally doing that. And I just want you to know I saw so much more love than hate.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask LeVar, if I could, to follow on that point, because it is hard to hold on to hope and to see the love rather than the hate. I mean, this is the first time we've ever had to have metal detectors at the Inamori Ethics Prize in 15 times of holding this event. But I would like to hear, if you could, I mean, we have a historic presidential election coming up. All of this is roiling in the air. Do you see ways that these rifts can heal? How do we approach moving things in the right direction? What can we do?
I think there are micro ways as well as macro solutions. On a micro level, well, let me get to the macro first, because again, as a storyteller, I really feel like I have something to contribute in this moment. And it actually boils down to my willingness to engage on a micro level as an individual. We've been talking all day, and I said earlier that my belief is that if we can share stories with one another, if I can have the patience to sit and listen to you tell me your story without interrupting, right? Giving you the space to share who you are with me, and that I in turn get that same respect from you, we have an opportunity to find commonality, right? How our lives are alike and may even in unexpected ways intersect. And if we can establish commonality, then there's an opportunity that we can actually get to something like compassion on one another. And if we can stand in compassion while engaging in conversation, then I believe we really have a shot at this. And I am challenged to identify the right place inside of myself, the right temperament from which to conduct these kinds of conversations with people who ideologically tend to believe very differently than I do. There's an article that just came out. Somebody sent it to me from the New York Post, where Elon Musk, a man who, say what you will about him, is very influential on this planet, has a company that has developed a piece of technology that is delivering sight to the blind. And in his announcement, he used a picture of Geordie LaForge with the visor on. And I thought, well, is this an opportunity for me to reach out on Twitter? I still call it Twitter. We all do. and ask Elon for more information? Is that what the universe is signaling to me, that it's time for you to put up or shut up, right? To walk your talk? I think that, yes, this is what I am being called to do, to stretch outside of my comfort zone and extend myself in the direction of people. I almost use the word others. I think we have to be so intentional, even in our languaging, right, about these very sensitive subjects, because we are sensitive beings. And I'm asking myself more and more these days, do you want to be right, LeVar, or do you want to be effective? And I always come down on the side of, well, really, I want to be effective. I want to be of benefit, of value. I want my work to bring value to the society in which I live. And so I am in a process of rigorous introspection and self-reflection, looking for myself to step up and put into practice that which I believe, and to engage on a really fundamentally human level, to bring compassion to these conversations, knowing that we have so much more that we have in common than we do reasons for discord.
Well, that's something I learned from you, LeVar, which is that it is hard to hate someone if you know their whole story. It's a very important lesson that you've shared. I'm thinking with what we're learning there, Amy, do you believe that there actually are priorities in the healthcare context or other that Ohioans, for example, but people generally actually do agree on, that we've sort of lost sight that we have some core agreement?
Yes, the fact is what most of us hold dear, infant mortality, gun violence. We know that over 80% of folks across the United States, gun owners included, want reasonable, safe gun laws. We know that literacy is a public health issue. We know that we want our schools to be strong. Ohio right now has some of the worst health outcomes in the country. They've done a fabulous study. The Washington Post and both the New York Times as well have been doing longitudinal studies on our life expectancy. We gained 30 years in the last century. We take this completely for granted, but only 5 of those years came from everything I learned in med school. The truth is that 25 of those extra years that we take for granted, when Thoreau wrote Walden Pond, he died by 48, the average age you live. We take this so for granted, but it was only due to things that we can solve collectively, like clean water, safe food, child labor laws. Child labor is now an issue again. Traffic safety. It goes on, that we must solve these things across systems and together, the wicked hard problems we face. And for the first time in history, we are going in the other direction. It was happening even before COVID. Certainly the opiate epidemic was a piece of it. But these diseases of despair, our Surgeon General did an amazing advisory. If you remember C. Everett Koop with the tobacco advisory, well, our Surgeon General has put out an advisory on human connection, social isolation, and that connection is so hardwired into us. Our need to survive is based on it. And that it actually underlies, it's the epidemiology of almost every disease we face, from things that are physical, like obesity, to the mental health disorders, that we're struggling with. And it's a fabulous report. I really suggest you look at it, because there are things you can do collectively as a society to make it better. And some countries actually have czars for social connection now. So there's so much potential, but hope is optimism with a plan. And I think we need to get down to work with our great public servants and our great sectors to get that work done.
Yeah, excellent. I think, Sue, with your role as a college president, you have a unique window on all of this. So you're getting a new batch of students every year. You're dealing with all these issues as they emerge. And I wonder if you could share with us, so having dealt with conflicts between priorities, people who care passionately about issues that are in tension with one another, how have you worked to resolve some of that, competing needs of different stakeholders and deciding things where you might say there's a good argument on either side? So if someone's arguing health versus, health and safety concerns versus at best educational practices, how do you resolve that? Because it sounds like there's no right. It's all wrong's intention.
Well, I think my training as a bioethicist actually has surprisingly come in very handy as the president of a small liberal arts college. And I say it's surprising because when I was in the search process for this job, I know that the trustees were wondering how in the world this might work because it wasn't obvious to them. And I was offered the job on January 30th of 2020 before any of us heard of COVID. And as the spring wore on, it became clearer and clearer that some of the rubrics and ways of thinking that bioethics employs, some of those principles were going to be really helpful as we had to make decisions about whether to impose a vaccine mandate, how to handle masking, when to go online, how to distribute scarce resources in a way that's most just. And I would say that experience of taking the helm at what might have been the worst possible summer ever to take a new job in a new city at a new institution taught me a lot of lessons that are helping now, because as you may have noticed, it's kind of a turbulent time in higher education.
Really?
And so what we're still having to navigate right now is how do you create a big tent? Because in many ways, the academy, colleges and universities are sort of our modern public square. They're the meeting place of many different ideas. We intentionally bring people from all over the world together to live and learn together. So of course, we're not all going to agree. Of course we're not. It's part of the experiment. So I think what's important to bear in mind is, well, given that we won't agree on everything, how can we coexist peacefully? How can we collaborate? How can we cooperate? We don't have to agree on every point in order to create knowledge for the benefit of humankind and the earth. But, that's easier said than done. So I think the cultivation of specific tools, that we need to assign ourselves the job of giving those tools to college students, because I'm sorry to say they're not consistently getting them in the K through 12 system. And many of the leaders in our country and around the world are not providing great examples to young people about how to disagree courteously or how to bridge ideological divides. But I've been thinking a lot about what our obligation is to younger people to give them those tools, because whether it is the pandemic or the civil rights crisis that we found ourselves in 2020, or the upcoming election, or the violence in the Middle East, all of these challenges, it would be lovely to think when we just get past this one, then things will be calm. But it's the human condition, right? There will be conflict. There will be things that come out of left field that we're going to have to work together on. I love the fact that in this panel, we've heard so much about virtues. Again, I'm going to rely on my bioethics training here and philosophy, your discipline, Shannon. We shouldn't be afraid to talk about kindness. We shouldn't be afraid to talk about courage or compassion. If we are going to make it through these wicked challenges we are facing right now, it's only going to happen because we persist despite fear.
Yes.
And extend a hand of friendship to one another and listen for understanding with curiosity rather than to condemn or to judge. So what I'm thinking is that I have a tremendous amount of hope, not just idealism, but hope, when I see how passionately the young people coming into college and university now feel about making the world better. And I think it's our obligation to give them the scaffolding and the tools to be able to do that important work.
You know, I heard when we were talking on the radio, Amy, you said kindness is not weakness, and I'm hearing that echoed again in your comments kindness on virtue.
Do not mistake it.
Yeah, do not mistake kindness for weakness. It's a powerful point, but also your broader point, Sue, about how the tools need to be there and that we can't count on students necessarily getting that somewhere else. And it is a painful reality that some of the examples they're seeing are quite the opposite. So we have to both provide other examples and be willing to talk about where we see things not being effective or not being productive and why. But I thought it was interesting. I had a conversation at an event here at Case Western that was about having hard conversations. And a student spoke to me and said very candidly, she was being honest about her reaction, that sometimes when she talks to someone, if they say something that lets her know their opinion on certain touchier subjects or a political perspective, she feels a wall come down. And she was describing herself. She wasn't saying that they were doing this. She said, I feel myself putting a wall down, saying, oh, that's not someone I want to interact with. And I thought it was wonderful that she said, what should I do when I feel the wall? You know, how do I address that? And you're talking about giving those kind of tools. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate you.
If I could add a little bit,
please, yeah.
Based on what you just said, I'm not saying it's easy, and I think that some of the challenges we're facing right now are so thorny that it would be almost insulting to say, "Oh, look, this person likes chocolate ice cream and you like vanilla. We can agree." Yeah, that's easy when you're talking about ice cream flavor, right? We're talking in many cases now about disagreements that involve someone denying the humanity of another person,
exactly,
saying whether they should live.
Yeah.
Saying whether they should be able to love who they want to love, saying whether they should be a citizen. I mean, really, these are existential kinds of disagreements that we're having now, not trivial ones. And so I recognize that it's difficult. I also think that it's very easy for us to want perfection. I think part of the wall coming down is like, if we don't see eye to eye on everything, then we can't see eye to eye on anything. Mm-hmm. To your point, LeVar, probably we have more in common than that separate us, but you only learn that if you take the time to listen.
And that's part of my point.
Yeah.
We have done a terrible job at providing the tools necessary in order to have these difficult conversations. We need to put more emphasis on breathing and meditation and slowing down and having empathy for one another, right? Reading is an empathy creating machine. So I would really love to see us take steps in our public health policy that take us more in the direction of helping us mitigate our own fears and give us tools with which to reach out.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I will simply add in echoing a point that I think Sue made, that we also don't want to lose sight of. But part of that is, one of those tools is also going to be knowing when you can walk away if someone is in fact dehumanizing you. Mm-hmm. And that is a form of self-protection. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you have to, I really appreciate what you all are, again, teaching us here today about when you let the wall come down and when you don't. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it is a defensive wall that's needed. I actually want to stick with a similar theme here. And if I could address this to you, LeVar, you obviously know a lot about technology. We were talking about Twitter. I still call it Twitter too. And one of the things that's happening, which is part of this mix as well, is that now we have disinformation that can spread as rapidly as any virus. And you, as an example, have been a champion of HIV/AIDS research for decades. And while I'm hopeful that you've seen some positive changes in people's attitudes, there's still stigma and many problems still exist. And very recently, people online were trying to paint Mpox as some kind of punishment. And you hear that kind of language, like this is a punishment from God or something. So building on this idea of how we actually navigate this stuff, do you have advice on how we can promote health language and policies, particularly with diseases that are associated with these vulnerable populations and do have, unfortunately, a stigma that people want to stick to them?
In time for the election?
Yeah, just solve that real quick if you would. Yeah, no pressure, no pressure.
I'm an Aquarian, okay, which means I am eternally hopeful. I have to be, right? I genuinely believe that we are designed to cooperate with one another. You've got a piece that I don't have. There's a piece over there that we both need. We really do better as a species when we cooperate with one another. And I think that's something that we've kind of gotten away from. We've entrenched in our own camps, and we've forgotten the mandate that we cooperate with one another. So hope is my best weapon, Shannon. And we were talking about fear earlier, right? Which is a real thing. And it's a natural thing to have fear about the unknown. My goal is to never allow fear to paralyze me into non-action. Fear is a part of the process. How you deal with the fear, how you allow it to impact you on your journey, on your mission, is everything.
So I'm going to take you back to your leadership role then, and this idea of giving these tools, instilling hope in people, promoting better understanding. Do you feel like there's a receptive audience to that as you do the work that you do? Do you think, as we see, new generations coming up, I'm wanting to hear more hope, I think. So I'm gonna put that on you, if I may.
I think that young people, this particular generation of young people who are in college and university now, are bringing a kind of passion and idealism that perhaps we haven't seen for a while. There have been previous punctuating moments of activism in the U.S. over time, and it was quiet for a little while. And young people today are not quiet, and which I think is wonderful. And I think that they are receptive to the idea that they can make change. In other words, this isn't just about making noise. It is about making real change. I think we as older people are obligated to take that really seriously and not disrespect young people for having passionate beliefs about how the world could be more peaceful and more just. I don't think it's our job to lead them, because I think they're perfectly capable of leading, but I think it's our job to support, to provide tools, to provide scaffolding, so that all of this energy can be channeled in ways that are positive and generative and create impact. So I'll give you just one or two examples of things I'm involved in now that are giving me hope. One is a program called Reduce the Rancor Minnesota. It's part of the Braver Angels movement. Yeah. McAllister College, which I lead, is quite possibly the most liberal college in the state. There's another college just a couple miles up the road called University of Northwestern, which used to be a Bible college and is perhaps the most conservative college in the state. I and the president of University of Northwestern are bringing together a faculty member from each institution and 6 students from each institution to break bread together once a month and get to know each other deeply and meaningfully, knowing that we're not going to agree on everything. But undertaking this project with intention to demonstrate that it is possible to listen deeply and to be friends with people who don't see eye to eye with you on everything. Now, coming back to your point, LeVar, that's very micro, right? What change can 14 people make? But I heard a lot of people just say, "Oh," in the audience when I describe this project. And I think examples can be powerful. Mm-hmm. And part of the work of leadership is service. I would say the bulk of leadership is service. And that means I can't just expect other people to do this work. I need to be willing to take that risk too. I need to be willing to be vulnerable too. I have to roll up my sleeves too. So watching those young people interact with one another, very tenderly and gingerly at first, and then with more enthusiasm and a little, looser as things go on, is inspiring me a lot right now. Similarly, there's a movement right now nationally, College Presidents for Civic Preparedness, which is mobilizing leaders in higher education to help our students be prepared to be engaged voters in this upcoming election and to take responsibility, their obligation, civically, that is to say, we have a responsibility as voters to be educated on the issues, to actually go to the polls. That's a responsibility of living in a democracy. Go to the polls, everybody. Please go to the polls. But again, to give students all the information and tools they need so that they can live out that responsibility. I really think that we all maybe got a little bit lazy before these crises happened, and our muscles were not flexed very well about the intentionality or deliberate action we need to take in order to live together in this project called the United States. So there are a lot of lessons that we can learn by these initiatives that can then serve as examples to inspire other similar kinds of actions.
Well, absolutely. And I got to say, I think 14 people trying to do good can probably do more than they realize. Amy, I would like to bring you into this because I heard again echoes and themes of things that I've heard you say when Sue was talking about sort of moments in history that mark some of these changes. Where do you think we are with that right now?
So I love that. I think of this generation as Generation C. I know they have some other thing, but we think about it for the COVID and the chaos and all of that. But I am seeing some of the most caring, compassionate people who are like willing to have hard conversations. They've lived through something, and certainly there are consequences to that. But I suspect this could be the greatest generation we've had in a while. And so right during COVID, it got lost under everything else, George Floyd and all the other things we are enduring. There's actually a bipartisan report done by the Academy of Arts and Sciences called Our Common Purpose. And it was a look at our democracy in which it said that this might be the fourth founding of our country. Not unlike the beginning of our country, the Civil War era, the Civil Rights era, now might be another one of those points. And I have to agree. I was born in 1966. I had this feeling coming of age that it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But what I realized looking under the hood as an ordinary human, getting under the hood of this country, that we have to co-create the world we want to live in generation after generation. We don't get to rest. This human project is not done. We are not the highest evolution of our being yet. And each one of us wrestles with these things. Believe me, there are days I want to crawl in bed and pull the covers over, and I do. And then I get up the next morning and I start again. And so I'd like to say we have 47 days left. Springfield has been haunting me. The governor and I went to Haiti with Fran. The governor, when he lost a daughter in a car accident, hydroplane coming home from working at the Xenia Gazette at the age of 21, he started building schools with his wife and a priest from Princeton. One of the hardest places in the world to help. And in Springfield, we have all these folks seeking asylum. It is a community that welcomed what immigrants can bring. I'm from Youngstown, everything was built on what immigrants do together to make this country better. It is a travesty. Please know, world, this is not our state. This is not what all of us believe. And I realize that the hate as a tool, and other countries are injecting this, so it's not just here, will keep us distracted from the real issues we want to solve together. It is done to pull us apart, and we can't let that happen. And I'll tell you, there'll be ways, little ways in your life. Most of my life was things that were not on camera. And those things that you just can't look the other way. When I think about my hard childhood, I think about the people who fed me and my brother walking to school because they saw we were hungry. I don't think about the haters with the guns. I don't think I'll end my life thinking about that. And then every now and then you'll find yourself in a really strange moment where you can't look the other way. So when that hate comes down, it will get worse between this election, and it does not end with this election, the work we have to do. Keep reaching out to one another. We all have people in our families, our own families. We do not live in ideologies. Most of our life is spent literally in relationships, just like the Surgeon General said. So we have to start building 14 people, breaking bread. Tikkun Olam is the message of the building we are sitting in. It means to repair the world. And it mostly happens in the small ways, right, LeVar? It is not in the big ways. But don't give up. Keep going.
Lamar, please.
Well, I want to add to that, Amy, because I do believe that as a storyteller, there is a macro level on which storytelling can have a piece of this. This nation has never done a good job of telling the story of who we are and how we got here. We've never, there's retrenchment now. There's efforts to stop teaching Black history, which is American history, in our schools. And so we have suffered as a nation the trauma of the enslavement of Black people, right? We've gone through 2 world wars. We've had assassinations of our leaders, pandemics, worldwide pandemics. We lost so many people during COVID, and we have barely scratched the surface of the mourning piece, right? We are walking open wounds in this country. And in terms of a national health crisis, unless we get a grip and begin to tell the truth about who we are and how we are behaving toward one another and shed light on how ridiculous and silly that is, I think we're missing a tremendous opportunity. Again, storytelling is the language that humanity uses to communicate. And the business that I'm in, I used to watch, I love Westerns. My mom loved Westerns. I watch Westerns to this day, but I don't root for the Cowboys anymore. You feel me? I grew up in an ethos that said that the settlers were good and the Indians were bad. And there's a lot of stuff about my government that I used to believe and hold true that as an adult with my eyes open, no longer hold water with me. So we have to grow up and be mindful of the stories, not just the ones we're telling, but the ones that we're absorbing, right? Because those are the stories that have the most immediate impact and influence on our day-to-day interactions, those macro stories that we invite in to our sphere, into who we are and how we walk in the world.
So, folks, I'm going to keep this wonderful conversation going, but this is your cue. If you want to ask a question, we're going to have folks with microphones who are going to be able to bring a microphone to you. So I'm going to say one more thing, but then after that, be ready, because I'm going to ask for hands to go up, and I'm going to try to let some of you weigh in if we can. My last point is another thing that came up in some of our other conversations that we've been privileged to have today. And that is that in my work with military ethics, we talk a lot about moral injury, and the fact that everyone is unfortunately an experiencer of trauma as they go through life. But trauma can take on a whole different character when it's accompanied by a feeling of betrayal. Like you feel betrayed by leadership, you feel betrayed in other ways. And that's when it gets into this territory of moral injury. And we have to, that's not the end of the stories again. We have to heal from moral injuries. But I'm wondering, do you think that language is helpful? You're nodding vigorously, Amy, if you want to jump in here.
So, one of the things, and I hope Dr. Fauci is listening as well, I so want to see a 9/11 style commission to really study everything we've been through. We have not been able to do that yet to the completeness that we should. It's too political. It's too hot. We are all naturally pulling away. I think if you would look under this hood, you would learn of innovations that were done. That people did, the heroism. Everywhere I go in the state, we need a story corps to capture the words and the experiences of people on the front lines and in every aspect of this. We will need to pause finally. We will need to mourn everything we have lost. We lost more people than all wars and everything. Katrina's, all of it combined in our history. People died of things not COVID because they couldn't get in an emergency room. These stories need to be told, and then we will begin to make meaning out of it with the wonderful help of our people and all multidisciplinary, not virologists and epidemiologists. Angela Merkel surrounded herself with theologians, supply chain experts, ethicists, people to help. Leaders now need to solve these complex problems in nuanced ways with all of this knowledge. That would be something I would change going into who's on the pandemic team. And then eventually we will memorialize it. And this ball, everywhere I go, honestly, there's not a time I go someplace where emotion just does not come out with every person I meet. Mm-hmm. They all have a story to tell, LeVar, so you're so right. And we need to do this in order to move on. And bad actors do take advantage of an unmoored population to their end. So we have that work yet to do.
Outstanding. So, ladies and gentlemen, do we have any questions from the audience for our incredible panel? Okay, I see someone right there, reddish tie maybe, gray suit. Yep, that's you. So there's a microphone coming towards you. Promise I'll look all around the room. I'm not going to try to... Go ahead, please.
Hi there.
Could you stand, sir, so we can actually see you?
Yeah, it would be easier to hear you if we...
Stand up?
Yes, please.
Thank you, sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Adam Bergner. I'm the Director of Global Health here at Case Western. And I had a question. I just wanted to say there's a lot of my heroes here today. Anthony Fauci, Amy, and of course, LeVar. I grew up watching Star Trek in high school and university, which kept me engaged in science. And I just wanted to ask you a question. Over to the left, we have a lot of young high school students. And I wanted your opinion about how we can help to educate and arm them to better navigate misinformation about public health and how they can lead us. And what kind of tools can we give them, and what messages should we be giving them so that they're prepared for the next generation? Thank you.
I'll start, but I'm sure that the other panelists will have really important things to say about this. The rise of social media, the advancement of AI technology, and other factors are making it more and more difficult to identify what is true and what is false. I also think that deliberate efforts have been made to undermine our faith in institutions and in facts because we're more easily manipulated when we're not sure what to trust or whom to trust. So I think it's even more urgent that our K through 12 system and our higher ed institutions are equipping students with tools of discernment to be appropriately skeptical of information, to seek primary sources, to verify information before passing it on because it may be false. And it's a lot more complicated to do that now with all the channels that are coming in from every direction than it was when people like you or when I was in school. So unfortunately, like every other technological advance, regulations and ethical ground rules lag behind the science. The science advances, and then we all try to catch up and figure out how to use it responsibly. And I feel like we're in that moment right now, where it's incumbent upon us as older people to jump in and help and make sure that younger people who are coming up have those tools so they don't look at something and assume that it's true. When we know that there are people, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say that there are forces at play here who are deliberately sowing discord by introducing false information into the streams that our young people are receiving. So to me, there needs to be an urgent call to action in order to help students develop those tools of discernment to figure out what's correct before they make decisions based on information they receive.
That is the word that came immediately to my mind, discernment. I think in addition to teaching breathing and yoga and conflict resolution in schools, we need to start teaching discernment. One of my favorite words in language, in the English language, is discernment. And my metaphor for discernment is a knife. I'm a collector of knives and blades, swords, pocket knives. I've been collecting since I was a kid. A knife is a weapon or a tool. It is the discernment of the wielder that determines its proper use, its appropriate use in any given instance. We need to equip our children with the power of discernment and media literacy. The ability to distinguish between fact and what's false. And we have failed to really inculcate the next generation with that kind of reasoning, that kind of analytic impulse to really look critically and think critically about what we are consuming in terms of our media diets.
Yeah. Absolutely. Did you have anything to add, Amy, on that? Yeah.
I would just add that other conversations we've had, it's been, how lucky am I, right, to get to hang out and have these sidebar conversations. But we were talking about on the radio today about your life. Like, I think to the young people here, you think you set out with a path. I know I had my sights set on being one kind of doctor, very much like Dr. Fauci. I pictured one kind of doctor that did one kind of thing. And your life takes you in many, many different directions. But you do begin to develop a moral compass. And again, thinking back to the origins of this prize and Mr. Inamori, how he lived his life and did his work. I think that's one of the most important things you're honing on a campus, and it is these translatable skills that you're learning, because everything will keep changing around you. During the pandemic, I talked about Joseph Campbell. I talked about all sorts of books and things, Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning. I talked about the hero's journey, because in the end, we are all sort of on heroic journeys living our lives. Like, no one goes unscathed. No one gets out of this that way. And over you meet, you go in the dark woods and you meet a dragon and that you have to slay. If you don't get eaten, you might come back and bring the gifts. This was where Star Wars came from, actually. Therefore,
Lucas
for those of us,
big Joseph Campbell fan.
Big Joseph Campbell fan, and as was I, and a science fiction fan. So Star Trek. But the truth is that actually is how it is. But the thing that will stay with you, and I know for me, making hard decisions during the pandemic that you saw, it's not that I was never afraid or never overwhelmed. We were overwhelmed every day with millions of decisions, Hunger Games for PPE, everything going on. But I'll tell you, There's nothing like 11.7 million lives on the line to kind of lock and load you into focus. And that'll be what you dig deep on, and you will mess up. And actually the things I messed up on were actually the greatest lessons that also helped me. So you are in the process of developing this compass that will help guide you. And it is our job to serve one another. So I hope that you have wonderful lives doing that.
Fantastic. Well, that was a great question and a great answer. I'm looking over here, and I'm going to ask one of our young people. I see one there. Gold sweater. You are what you wear? I don't know. That's just...
Thank you. Hi, my name is Freya French. Hi, Mom.
Oh, man, I was going to try to let you get away with pretending you didn't know me.
You've been a part of our day, too. We've heard about you.
My question has to do with the impending I guess it's definitely a public health crisis, along with young people and social media's effect on our mental health, and how either public officials or school officials or even everyday Americans can help mitigate those effects.
Great.
So I think we got to start with you.
So back to the human connection thing, we have discovered, obviously, the mental health issues that were going on for young people have begun. You're starting to see policies like, can we keep phones out of the classroom so that we can all look up? I have to admit, I have that same problem. Like, how do we, I think at the heart of it all is connection. In one way, we invested a lot in this administration in mental health. Like, we can finally talk about it and understand that it is all connected. One of the quiet things we did during the pandemic, but when George Floyd happened, there was literally a day I wasn't on air because we were having a large debate about how we would address racism as a public health issue. And the very next day, I came out with the governor, and he declared racism a public health issue and out loud. And what does that mean? It means that all these things we are doing, the thought that we were like organs separated from each other, the mind is somehow separated from the body and from the emotions. A vestige of the method of science we were using in the 50s. It's all one thing. And living in oppression, living in hypervigilant states, getting on an elevator where someone looks at you like you are different and you are aware of it, because we see all these subtle things. When I was a little kid being poor, noticing that parents didn't want their kids to play with me because I was smelly and dirty, like you're a dirtball, and all those things are part of us. And get hardwired into us, affect our cortisol system. And so mental health, to me, whether we call it a crisis, what we're talking about is taking care of the holistic aspects of ourselves. And our young people are telling us, thank goodness, communicating to us, and keep communicating what they're experiencing. And this is what you'll see in policy now moving forward, trying to address the whole of us. What the pandemic did is unmask everything.
Yeah, it did.
It was the great unmasker, and I kept thinking this is the greatest opportunity. Just remember that when things are most falling apart and when we are most hurting, and like I said, we're still carrying around all this hurt balled up inside of us, we all are carrying it, is actually when walls fall away and you can have the most creative new solutions. But I believe they will be by Public Health 101, make a table, get every system that addresses any one issue around that table, ask yourself who is not at this table, and begin to solve those wicked hard problems. And so in this crisis we are facing, is also a tremendous opportunity for us to take a leap forward in how we address our mental and physical health.
Anything either of you would like to add? Go ahead, Sue.
I would just briefly add, going in a slightly different direction, that I think it's wonderful that during COVID we're willing to destigmatize and admit that there are legitimate mental health challenges that we need to address. I also think we have pathologized feelings in a way that's unproductive.
Yes.
I think if you feel sad when someone you love dies, that is a normal human emotion. If you feel nervous before you have to get up in front of a class to give a book report, that is a human emotion. We should not be afraid to express our humanity. And it doesn't mean we're having a mental health crisis if we get upset about something. So just being able to talk openly about our feelings in a vulnerable way is healthy, and we should do more of that.
Care to add?
Oh.
Excellent.
I just want to thank the students for being with us. It was great having you here.
Now they have to catch their bus back to their district, so they're not. Thank you. Gentleman right here. Yes. Gonna go with gray polo shirt.
Hello, my name is Juan Jeffrey. I work at the Cancer Center here. Dr. Acton, thank you for your service for Ohio during the pandemic, during the lockdown. And thank you for your kind words for Springfield. It's my hometown. And like many people here, I grew up watching Reading Rainbow with Mr. Burton, and thank you for showing us a love of reading that has stuck with me my whole life. And now every time I see a butterfly, I sing to it, and I can fly higher. But what you were saying before about reaching out with the different colleges, you know, and what you were talking about before, meeting people where they are, what's a way that people can meet people who aren't in university where they are and reach out and to connect?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me, that question too, in the context of, we were just saying that there are some harms with social media, but in some ways it can connect more distant people. What are the best ways in our world to connect to people who are very different than we are?
I think we will find that within our own circles, there are plenty of people that have gone as yet unidentified as perfect candidates for this kind of experimentation. We don't need to look very far field. They're in our communities, at work, at school. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. So it makes sense that we have access to one another. We really do. We just have to be conscious of it. The word intention and intentionality has been used a lot today, and I don't think it's possible to overuse the word or to focus on its meaning. To really have purposeful intent to get something done is an important step in the manifestation process. You can't manifest what you can't identify, what you can't name, right? And so creating in your mind a thought that says, this is my purpose, this is my intention, this is what I'm setting out to do, actually sets the table for the success of that endeavor.
Want to add or fit with that? Let me get some more questions. Right here and then behind you. So we've got two kind of in a row. Yes, ma'am, first you. Gorgeous dress.
Hi, I'm Angela Carpenter, and I'm the Alumni Association here at Western Reserve University. And I want to try to get to my question without getting a little teary-eyed. The perspective of a mother, what my daughter had to go through with having her. She ended up having to have an emergency. She was in excruciating pain. 4 more meds, but and also she became extremely weak. Her husband allowed me with her because at that time during COVID, there was only 2 people there. So I was the one to have to get up in the middle of the night with my grandson, feed my grandson. She was extremely weak. She was crying because that first connection with the mother and the baby is very important. I found myself laying the baby on her so that that connection remained there. But seeing how weak she was, having to have blood transfusions, asking for the nurses to provide pumps because she's not able to pump and feed her son. She actually had to start the milk, the regular, milk, and that was not her journey that she wanted to start with my grandson. So, just having to fight, for my daughter. What is the conversation in the health field surrounding the processes in building trust with African American women and young women, women of color, and letting them know that they are heard? Because even after that, she dealt with endometriosis really, really bad, and her doctor was saying, oh, you'll be fine. And it was like she knows her body, something is not right, what is going on. So what is the conversation surrounding advocacy with women of color?
Thank you for your question and also sharing your story. I know that wasn't easy. Thank you. Any of you like to address her concerns?
I will briefly. First of all, I also want to thank you for your courage in speaking up. I'm not an expert particularly on this field, but what I'll say is, I mean, this special, I'm not an OBGYN. What I do know is that here in Cleveland, where there is a maternal mortality crisis among Black women and an infant mortality crisis among Black babies, there are wonderful, innovative programs underway, including things like First Year Cleveland, which I believe is housed here at Case Western Reserve University, Birthing Beautiful Communities, that's putting Black doulas into communities to walk side by side with pregnant moms, and other initiatives to try to reverse this really tragic trend. And I agree with you that part of the problem is that women are not trusted. Black women are not trusted. Women of color are not trusted. Women in general are not trusted, and their pain isn't taken seriously. And I'm really sorry that happened to your daughter. I know there are programs trying to address it, but what I was saying in my very first answer was, I don't think it's enough to tell people they need to trust the medical profession. I think the medical profession needs to demonstrate its trustworthiness by doing the things it says it's going to do, by people doing what they say they're going to do. And we have a lot of work to do. Testimony like yours is really helpful to point out the problem.
It really is. And with deep apologies to the gentleman who I tried to call on, it went a little bit... I've been reminded that we actually have a time limit on this. I could do this all day, in the words of Captain America, but unfortunately I can't, because I need to invite back up to stage Provost Ward, because there is another element to this. So as she's coming up here, please join me once again in thanking our amazing panelists.
Yeah, I know. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor French. It is just always an honor to collaborate with you. We're so grateful for all that you do. And to our panelists, thank you for such a lively, empowering, and important discussion. We're really fortunate to have been able to be here today to hear that. At this time, I'll have Professor French begin to collect the medal, and I will ask Mr. Burton to please come up to the front of the table. Up onto the table here. Now, on the recommendation of the Inamori Ethics Prize Selection Committee, it is my pleasure to present the 2024 Inamori Ethics Prize Medal to Anthony Fauci. Dr. Fauci, we wish to recognize your profound contributions and ethical leadership in the field of global health care and immunology. Mr. LeVar Burton, our 2019 Inamori Ethics Prize recipient for ethical leadership in the arts, has accepted that award on behalf of Dr. Fauci. Now I'd like to invite you to say some words.
Thank you. First of all, Dr. Fauci, I'm a huge fan. And I have enormous and the utmost respect for you and your commitment to public health over decades. Thank you, Provost Ward. I appreciate you. I'm happy to accept this 2024 Inamori Ethics Prize on behalf of Dr. Anthony Fauci in recognition of his outstanding global ethical leadership in healthcare. Dr. Fauci and his wife, Dr. Grady, send their warmest regards and gratitude as Dr. Fauci continues his recovery from West Nile virus. Now, I know that as soon as he is able, it says here on the script, Tony, my mother would really be upset if I called Dr. Fauci Tony. It's just not in me. Dr. Fauci, who has always been a tireless advocate for good health and good science, will be eager to resume his work further inspired by this lovely recognition on the good doctor's behalf. I say thank you.
Please join me in heartfelt congratulations to Dr. Fauci and our deep gratitude to former Inamori Prize winner, Mr. LeVar Burton. I want to thank all of you for attending today's symposium, and this concludes the 2024 Inamori Ethics Prize Academic Symposium. And I hope that you all have a wonderful and safe day. Thank you.